previous journeys, we have remained securely tethered to the Earth. We have explored the quiet, meticulous architecture of human history, bound entirely by the familiar gravity, the breathable atmosphere, and the predictable rotation of our own world. We have observed the finite, measurable landscapes of our own ancestors. But tonight, we are severing that tether. We are leaving the Earth entirely behind. Rather than moving backward through human time, we will travel through the immense, unyielding architecture of space-time. We are crossing the boundary of the exosphere, passing through the frozen, scattered debris of the outer rim, and entering the profound, absolute silence of the interstellar medium. Space is not simply an empty, abstract canvas. It is a physical, measurable dimension of staggering, almost incomprehensible proportions. It is a freezing, frictionless vacuum spanning billions of light years, containing trillions of galaxies, each holding billions of ancient, burning stars. The scale of the cosmos is so utterly massive, so completely indifferent to the brief, flashing existence of biological life, that the architecture of our minds fundamentally struggles to process the mathematics of its existence. Tonight, we are looking outward, deep into the constellation of Aquarius. We are leaving the microscopic, fragile neighborhood of our own solar system to observe a phenomenon located exactly 39.6 light years away from Earth. To understand the journey we are taking tonight, we must first understand the absolute, unyielding physics of distance. In the mechanics of the universe, light is the ultimate, unbreakable speed limit. It is a fundamental constant of reality. A single photon of light, generated in the nuclear furnace of a star, travels through the vacuum of space at exactly 186,282 miles every single second. It is a blinding, unfathomable velocity. At that speed, a beam of light could circle the entire physical equator of the Earth, more than 7.5 times in the time it takes you to draw a single breath. If you were to let that beam of light travel at that maximum velocity for an entire year, it would cross roughly 5.8 trillion miles of empty space. And yet, even moving at that staggering, absolute maximum speed, the faint red light we are observing tonight took nearly 4 entire decades to cross the dark void of interstellar space and reach the lenses of our telescopes. When we look at this star system, we are not seeing it as it exists right now. We are looking backward into the past. We are seeing the light exactly as it was nearly 40 years ago. To make this journey, we are traversing roughly 235 trillion miles of empty, silent, freezing space. Out here, there is no day, there is no night, there is no air to carry the vibration of sound. The violent, massive mechanics of the universe occur in a state of profound, terrifying, and majestic quiet. At the end of this unimaginable distance, resting entirely alone in the pitch-black ocean of Aquarius, is the Trappist-1 solar system. It is a deeply mysterious, completely alien environment, a clockwork system of 7 rocky worlds, suspended in the unyielding gravitational grip of a star that is fundamentally, violently different from our own. As we cross the boundary into this distant system, the star slowly reveals itself against the black canvas of the void. It is not a blinding, violently hot yellow dwarf like our sun. It belongs to a much older, much more common astronomical classification. It is an M dwarf, an ultra-cool red dwarf. The physical dimensions of this star are mesmerizing. In the vast catalog of stellar objects, it is remarkably small. It is barely larger in physical volume than the gas giant Jupiter. But the laws of mass and gravity here are extreme. Though it is only a fraction of our sun's volume, its density is massive. It holds nearly 84 times the mass of Jupiter, crushed entirely into the exact same spherical space. This staggering, immense physical weight creates a crushing, unimaginable pressure at the very core of the star. A pressure so absolute that it physically strips the electrons from hydrogen atoms, forcing their nuclei to violently collide and fuse together in a slow, relentless, eternal nuclear reaction. This process of nuclear fusion is the heartbeat of the star. But in a red dwarf, it occurs at an agonizingly slow, deeply conservative pace. When a single photon of light is created in the crushing depths of the star's core, it does not immediately escape into space. It is trapped inside the unimaginably dense plasma. It begins a process known to astrophysicists as the random walk. The photon bounces violently off densely packed atoms, moving a fraction of a millimeter at a time, endlessly absorbed and re-emitted in random directions. For a single particle of light to travel from the absolute center of this red dwarf to its surface, it takes hundreds of thousands of years. The dim, red light we're looking at in this exact moment was forged in the crushing, silent depths of the star's core hundreds of millennia ago. Because of its smaller size and its relatively cool surface temperature of just over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, it does not emit the harsh, piercing white glare that bathes our own world. If you were to look directly at this star, you would not be blinded. Instead, this star bathes the surrounding vacuum in a deep, heavy, eternal spectrum of infrared and dark crimson light. It hangs in the pitch-black void like a massive, glowing ember, a colossal, perfect sphere of burning gas, suspended in absolute silence. If we look closely at the surface of the star, we can observe the fascinating fluid dynamics of its plasma. Unlike our sun, which has distinct, separate internal layers of radiation and convection, this red dwarf is entirely convective. This means the superheated, boiling plasma from the crushing depths of the nuclear core physically rises all the way to the surface, releases its thermal energy into the vacuum of space, and slowly, heavily, sinks back down into the center of the star to be reheated. It creates massive, slow-moving magnetic thermal currents of darker red plasma, churning silently across its glowing amber face. The physics of a fully convective red dwarf dictate a lifespan that entirely defies the human concept of time. Our own sun is burning through its finite hydrogen supply at a rapid pace. It will exhaust its core fuel, violently expand into a red giant, and completely consume the inner planets in roughly 5 billion years. But Trappist-1 constantly recycles its own fuel. It drags fresh, unburned hydrogen from its surface directly into its core. Because it burns its fuel so slowly and with such extreme, relentless efficiency, it will continue to burn for trillions of years. The entire universe is currently only 13.8 billion years old. Trappist-1 is a cosmic infant, long after our sun has collapsed into a dead white dwarf. Long after the brightest, most violent stars in the Milky Way have detonated in massive supernovae and faded to black. Trappist-1 will still be glowing. It will survive into the deep, dark future of the cosmos. When the universe enters the Degenerate era, when nearly all other lights have gone out, this ancient, unyielding monument of physics will still be casting its heavy, red light into the dark. It operates on a timescale so massive, so completely eternal, that the entire history of humanity, the rise and fall of every empire, is nothing more than a microscopic, entirely irrelevant fraction of a second. And locked in the eternal, inescapable gravitational well of this ancient star are the planets. We did not discover these worlds by seeing them directly. They do not generate their own light. They are much too small, much too dark, and much too far away to be photographed across 235 trillion miles of space. We discovered them through a brilliant mathematical phenomenon known as transit photometry. For hundreds of hours, the Spitzer Space Telescope stared unblinking at the faint, distant light of this single red star. And astronomers noticed a microscopic, temporary dimming of the star's crimson light, a tiny, repetitive shadow passing across the burning plasma. By measuring the exact duration and the fractional depth of those shadows, the physics of an entire alien solar system were revealed. From the dark, freezing edge of the system, we can now observe their transit. 7 perfectly spherical, rocky worlds. 7 dark silhouettes drifting slowly, relentlessly, across the deep red face of their star. Their orbital mechanics are a masterpiece of physical resonance. They are packed incredibly close to the star and impossibly close to one another. The entire massive system of 7 planets is so compact that it could easily fit completely inside the orbit of the planet Mercury in our own solar system. If you were standing on the surface of one of these alien worlds, the neighboring planets would not appear as distant, twinkling stars in the night sky. They would loom massive in the heavens, immense, detailed spheres of rock and ice, passing close enough to visibly block out the light of the sun. You would be able to look up and watch the massive shadows of alien mountain ranges and frozen oceans shift in real time as they transit across the sky. Yet, despite this staggering proximity, they never collide. Their gravitational pulls are locked in a complex, unyielding mathematical chain, a phenomenon known as a Laplace resonance. As they orbit the star, their massive gravitational fields reach out and pull at one another, tugging and correcting their speeds in a precise, permanent rhythm. It stabilizes their incredibly tight paths through the void in a silent, cosmic waltz. For every 8 times the innermost planet circles the star, the second planet orbits exactly 5 times. The third planet exactly 3 times. the fourth planet exactly 2 times. It is a mathematically perfect, endless sequence. 8 to 5 to 3 to 2. A massive planetary clockwork spinning flawlessly in the dark. If one planet drifts slightly out of alignment, the gravitational pull of its massive neighbors gently, firmly pulls it back into its mathematically designated path. Tonight, we will act as quiet, invisible documentarians of this distant machinery. We will drift slowly through the system, crossing millions of miles of empty space, and look down at the stark, brutal, and breathtaking landscapes of these 7 worlds. We will examine planets where the delicate mathematical conditions of orbit might support vast global oceans of liquid water, and we will observe others where the extreme thermodynamics of space have rendered the surface into cracked obsidian and eternal ice. The distances are vast. The physics are absolute. Let the sheer, undeniable scale of the cosmos wash over you. As we move inward toward the intense, scorching heat of the innermost planets, simply listen to the slow, heavy mechanics of the universe, spinning endlessly in the dark. We drift inward, moving away from the quiet, distant vantage point of the outer system. We descend into the immediate orbital boundary of the red dwarf. Here, the vast, empty distances of deep space are violently compressed. We are approaching the first 2 worlds of this alien system, Trappist-1b and Trappist-1c. These are terrestrial planets. They are massive spheres of dense silicate rock and heavy iron cores, remarkably similar in fundamental mass and elemental composition to our own Earth. But any comparison to our homeworld is immediately shattered by the brutal, unyielding mechanics of their orbits. In our solar system, the Earth sits at a vast, heavily insulated distance of 93 million miles from the Sun, a massive, silent cushion of empty space that protects our fragile atmosphere from the violent, stripping radiation of the star. Trappist-1b enjoys no such distance. It is locked in a relentless, blindingly tight orbit, barely 1.5 million miles from the roaring plasma of the red dwarf. The gravitational forces operating at this extreme proximity are staggering. To prevent itself from being pulled directly into the crushing depths of the star, the planet is forced to travel through the void with immense, unstoppable kinetic velocity. It moves so incredibly fast that it completes an entire orbit around the star in just 1.5 Earth days. An entire year. The complete, massive cycle of a planet's journey through the cosmos is over in less than 40 hours. But the concept of a day, the rhythmic, comforting cycle of a sunrise and a sunset, does not exist here. As we observe Trappist-1b from the silent vacuum of space, we witness one of the most absolute, terrifying physical phenomena in astrophysics. It is a mechanical certainty known as tidal locking. When a planetary body orbits this incredibly close to a massive center of gravity, the star's gravitational pull is not uniform. The star physically pulls much harder on the near side of the planet than it does on the far side. This creates a massive planetary scale gravitational gradient. The entire globe is physically stretched by the math of the cosmos. It is pulled slightly out of a perfect sphere into a faint, microscopic oval. Billions of years ago, when this planet first formed from the violent accretion disk of the early solar system, it was spinning rapidly on its axis. But as it spun, the massive gravitational deformation, the tidal bulge of solid rock, was dragged across the planetary surface. Millions of tons of solid subterranean rock and heavy iron were forced to continuously bend and flex and grind against themselves, desperately trying to stay perfectly aligned with the overwhelming gravity of the star. This relentless internal geological friction created an immense planetary break. Deep within the mantle, the kinetic energy of the planet's rotation was slowly, violently bled away into heat. It slowed the spin of the globe, millimeter by millimeter, century after century, until eventually the kinetic energy was entirely exhausted. The rotation simply stopped. The heavy tidal bulge settled permanently, facing the star, and the planet became perfectly, eternally locked in place. Now, Trappist-1b is paralyzed. It is locked in a permanent, unblinking stare. One hemisphere faces the star in an eternal, punishing state of daytime. The other hemisphere faces outward into the freezing abyss of deep space, plunged into an endless, pitch-black night. A world permanently divided by the unyielding laws of gravity. We descend toward the day side of Trappist-1b because of its extreme proximity to the red dwarf. The planet is relentlessly bombarded by stellar winds and intense ultraviolet radiation. Over billions of years, this violent solar activity has entirely stripped away any atmosphere the planet might have once possessed. There are no clouds here. There is no air. There is no protective barrier of atmospheric gases. The surface is directly, violently exposed to the freezing vacuum of space. The thermodynamics of this exposure are absolute. The surface temperature at the substellar point, the exact dead center of the day side directly facing the star, exceeds 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At this extreme temperature, the intense, unremitting thermal energy of the star physically alters the state of matter. The fundamental bonds holding silicate minerals together simply collapse. The crust of the planet is a fractured, broken wasteland of dark basalt and cracked obsidian. And cutting through the deep, jagged canyons of this black rock are massive, sluggish oceans of molten magma. But the fluid dynamics of this liquid rock are incredibly slow. This is not the fast-flowing, splashing lava of an earth volcano. It is unimaginably thick, heavy, and highly viscous. Millions of tons of superheated iron and glowing silicate rock churn and fold over themselves in extreme, hypnotic slow motion. Floating on this endless sea of fire are massive tectonic plates of hardened, blackened crust, drifting aimlessly before slowly colliding, cracking, and melting effortlessly back into the glowing orange depths below. Because there is no atmosphere, there is no wind to sweep across the jagged rocks. There is no weather. And, most profoundly, there is absolutely no sound. The massive, apocalyptic violence of this landscape, the grinding of tectonic plates and the boiling of liquid stone, occurs in a state of absolute, terrifying quiet. If you were to stand on this fractured, glowing crust, the sky above you would not be blue. It would be the infinite, pitch-black void of deep space. But dominating that black sky, hanging permanently, motionless, directly overhead, is the star. It would appear massive, a colossal, looming sphere of deep crimson plasma, filling the heavens with a heavy, oppressive red light. It never shifts, it never moves, it simply burns. And drifting silently past this massive sun, clearly visible against the dark void, are the neighboring planets of the system. Because the orbits are so tightly packed, Trappist-1c and Trappist-1d pass by like massive, highly detailed moons. They are so close that you could watch the shadows of their craters and surface features shift in real time as they transit across the sky. It is a breathtaking display of planetary mechanics, operating on a scale that makes biological existence seem entirely insignificant. Just slightly further out from the star, sitting at roughly 1.4 million miles, is Trappist-1c. It is the heaviest, most massive terrestrial planet in the entire system. It holds roughly 1.3 times the mass of the Earth. Like its inner sibling, it is deeply tidally locked, doomed to present only one face to the eternal fire of the red dwarf. But as we observe Trappist-1c from orbit, its surface is entirely hidden from our view. Unlike the barren, stripped rock of the first planet, astronomers hypothesize that this massive world managed to hold on to its gases. But in the searing heat of the inner system, an atmosphere is not a sanctuary. It is a planetary trap. Trappist-1c is a true Venusian hellscape, a dense world suffocating under a thick, impenetrable blanket of toxic greenhouse gases. The physics of a runaway greenhouse effect are incredibly efficient. The deep red light of the star penetrates the thick clouds of carbon dioxide and strikes the surface of the planet, where it is absorbed and re-emitted as infrared heat. But the heavy, dense atmosphere acts as an unyielding thermal wall. It refuses to let the heat escape back into the cold vacuum of space. The temperature builds, compounding upon itself over millions of years, until the entire planet becomes a crushing, global oven. The atmospheric pressure on the surface of this world would be immense, nearly 90 times heavier than the air on Earth. It is a pressure so heavy, so absolute, that at the bottom of the deep canyons, the carbon dioxide gas is physically crushed into a supercritical fluid, a bizarre, alien state of matter that behaves simultaneously like a heavy liquid and a thick gas. And because one side of the planet is eternally heated by the sun, and the other side is eternally staring into the freezing void, the atmosphere is forced into a state of violent, continuous motion. The laws of thermodynamics demand that heat must flow to the cold. Massive, planetary scale winds, unstoppable global hurricanes, howl continuously across the Terminator line. These supersonic gales drag millions of tons of superheated, toxic gas from the burning dayside, desperately trying to carry the thermal energy into the eternal dark of the night side. It is a massive, violent, atmospheric engine that never powers down. These innermost worlds, Trappist-1b and Trappist-1c, are the cosmic shields of the system. They take the absolute brunt of the star's radiant energy, existing as heavy, silent machines of molten rock, crushing pressure, and fire. They are majestic, violent, and entirely indifferent to our existence. They simply obey the flawless, unyielding mathematical laws of gravity and thermodynamics. We leave them to their endless, slow-motion churn. We drift further outward, pushing deeper into the dark, quiet space of the system, moving away from the extreme heat and crossing an invisible, highly critical mathematical boundary in the void. The distance from the star is expanding. The intense radiation is dropping. We are finally entering the habitable zone. We drift further outward, leaving the blistering, molten gravity wells of the inner planets entirely behind us. We cross an invisible, mathematically precise boundary in the absolute vacuum of space. It is a region known to astrophysicists as the circumstellar habitable zone. This is not a physical wall. It is not a visible barrier that can be seen or touched in the dark. It is simply a profound thermodynamic threshold. In the vast, chaotic mechanics of the universe, water is one of the most common molecules in existence. It is forged in the massive, dying explosions of ancient stars and scattered across the infinite dark in the form of frozen ice crystals. But for water to exist in a heavy, liquid state, the physical conditions of a planet must be mathematically perfect. If a world orbits too close to its star, the intense radiant energy excites the water molecules, causing them to violently expand and boil away into superheated vapor, lost forever to the solar wind. If a world orbits too far away, the ambient thermal energy drops to absolute zero. We drift further outward, leaving the blistering, molten gravity wells of the inner planets entirely behind us. We cross an invisible, mathematically precise boundary in the absolute vacuum of space. It is a region known to astrophysicists as the circumstellar habitable zone. This is not a physical wall. It is not a visible barrier that can be seen or touched in the dark. It is simply a profound thermodynamic threshold. In the vast, chaotic mechanics of the universe, water is one of the most common molecules in existence. It is forged in the massive, dying explosions of ancient stars and scattered across the infinite dark in the form of frozen ice crystals. But for water to exist in a heavy, liquid state, the physical conditions of a planet must be mathematically perfect. If a world orbits too close to its star, the intense radiant energy excites the water molecules, causing them to violently expand and boil away into superheated vapor, lost forever to the solar wind. If a world orbits too far away, the ambient thermal energy drops to absolute zero. Like its scorched inner siblings, the rotation of Trappist-1d was arrested by the immense gravity of the red dwarf billions of years ago. The relentless, grinding friction of its own heavy mantle bled away its kinetic energy, leaving it permanently, inescapably, tidally locked. From our silent, omniscient vantage point in deep orbit, the brutal consequences of this orbital mechanic are clearly visible across the entire globe. A tidally locked planet possessing an atmosphere and water is a world of absolute, terrifying extremes. The planet is fundamentally torn in half. The substellar hemisphere, the exact half of the planet eternally facing the overwhelming light of the red dwarf, is a scorched, barren desert of irradiated rock. Because the star never moves from the center of the sky, the rock is baked by an endless, unyielding barrage of infrared radiation. Any moisture that might have existed on this side of the planet evaporated into a thick, superheated vapor billions of years ago, leaving behind nothing but dry, cracked basins of ancient stone. Conversely, the anti-stellar hemisphere, the half of the planet facing outward into the infinite, pitch-black void of deep space, is a silent, unyielding tomb. Astronomers refer to this dark hemisphere as a cold trap, because it never receives a single photon of light or heat from the star. The temperature on the night side plunges hundreds of degrees below zero. Any water vapor or volatile gases that drift onto the night side of the planet are immediately, violently frozen out of the atmosphere. They fall to the surface as dense nitrogen snow and heavy water ice. It is a wasteland of miles-thick glaciers, buried under a perpetual pitch-black night, illuminated only by the cold, unblinking light of distant galaxies. Two absolute, opposing physical states: burning rock and freezing ice. But separating these two absolute extremes, running vertically from the North Pole to the South Pole, all the way around the entire circumference of the planet, is a narrow band of equilibrium, the Terminator Line. The Terminator Line is a stationary ring of perpetual twilight. It is a global border, where the burning, destructive heat of the dayside and the crushing, frozen vacuum of the night side meet. They violently clash and neutralize one another, creating a narrow corridor of exact, permanent thermodynamic balance. We descend slowly from the silent vacuum of space, pushing our way down through the heavy, turbulent atmosphere, and enter the Terminator Line. The visual reality of this environment is completely alien to the human experience of time and light. On Earth, a sunset is a fleeting, temporary optical illusion, a brief, beautiful transition caused by the continuous rotation of the planet as it turns its face away from the sun. But on Trappist-1D, the sunset is not an event. It is not a measurement of passing time. It is a permanent, physical, geographical location, because the entire massive globe of the planet does not spin. The colossal red dwarf star never rises into the sky, and it never sets below the edge of the world. It is bolted permanently, flawlessly, to the exact edge of the horizon. The entire twilight zone is trapped in an eternal, unyielding state of dusk. If you were to stand on the rocky surface of this border, looking out toward the sun, the sky above you would be a breathtaking gradient of cosmic physics, because the light from the red dwarf must pass through thousands of miles of thick atmosphere to reach you on the edge of the world. The shorter wavelengths of light are entirely scattered away. Directly over the horizon, staring into the face of the star, the heavy atmosphere burns in dense, suffocating shades of bruised crimson, burnt orange, and dark, heavy violet. But as you look upward, tilting your head toward the frozen night side of the planet, the heavy violet rapidly thins. The atmospheric scattering fades, giving way entirely to the pitch black void and the cold, unblinking light of billions of distant, ancient stars directly overhead. You are standing simultaneously in the fading light of day and the infinite depth of the cosmic night, because the massive sun is forever pinned exactly to the horizon. The angle of the light never changes. The shadows cast by the towering, jagged rocky canyons do not move. They stretch outward for hundreds of miles across the barren rock, perfectly still, unshifting, painting the landscape in permanent, eternal stripes of heavy dark and dim red light. If you were to stand in one of these massive shadows, you could wait for 1,000,000 years, and the sun would never touch your skin. And resting quietly in the deep, carved basins of these rocky canyons, hidden within those massive, unmoving shadows, is water. Vast, dark blue rivers and incredibly deep, shadowy lakes. The water here does not reflect a bright blue sky, because the ultra-cool red dwarf emits almost zero blue light. The water absorbs the infrared radiation. It appears as a heavy, dark, ink-like liquid, reflecting only the bruised violet and amber of the permanent sunset above. But this twilight ocean is not entirely peaceful. The extreme thermodynamics of a tidally locked planet demand violent, continuous motion. The laws of physics dictate that the massive thermal energy absorbing into the day side must eventually find its way to the freezing cold of the night side. This extreme planetary temperature differential creates a massive, permanent atmospheric engine. High above the dark water, in the upper layers of the troposphere, the superheated air from the day side violently expands and rises. Simultaneously, the freezing, dense air from the night side rapidly contracts and sinks. This creates a massive, planetary-scale convection cell. High above the surface of the Terminator line, in the dark, violet sky, hurricane-force global winds howl continuously from the day side into the night. It is a relentless, roaring gale, a supersonic river of atmospheric gas, desperately trying to balance the heat of the planet. This global wind system operates completely independent of seasons or weather. It never stops. It never slows down. Yet, down here on the surface, at the very bottom of the heavy atmosphere, the jagged, ancient canyon walls break the violence of the wind. Beneath the howling upper atmosphere, the dark water simply rolls in a slow, heavy, rhythmic churn. It is a landscape frozen in a single, eternal moment. A world perfectly, mathematically balanced on a razor's edge of physics. This dark river has been flowing under this exact same red sky, through this exact same twilight, for billions of years. There are no seasons here. There are no years. There is only the endless, heavy rolling of the water, trapped between the fire and the ice. It simply operates, a silent, majestic machine, churning liquid and air in the dim red light of a paralyzed sun. We observe the heavy, dark water rolling silently against the ancient rock for just a moment longer. We leave the eternal twilight behind, drifting slowly back up through the heavy cloud layer, rising past the roaring global winds and returning to the quiet, weightless vacuum of space. We push even deeper into the habitable zone, moving further away from the star, toward a world where the liquid water is not confined to a narrow, shadowy border, moving toward a world where the water has completely and utterly swallowed the planet whole. We leave the shadowy, jagged borders of the Terminator line entirely behind us, rising silently back up through the heavy, turbulent atmosphere of the third planet. We return to the freezing, frictionless vacuum of the cosmic ocean. We are drifting further outward, pushing deeper into the exact mathematical center of the circumstellar habitable zone. The blistering, violent heat of the inner system is now millions of miles behind us. The intense radiation of the ultra-cool red dwarf has physically weakened, decaying over the vast distance of empty space, softening into a deep, heavy, eternal amber glow. We are approaching the crown jewel of the Trappist-1 system, the fourth planet, Trappist-1e, in the vast, meticulous catalog of exoplanets discovered by humanity. This specific world holds a profound, almost mythical status among astrophysicists. Its physical dimensions are a near flawless mirror of our own home. Its radius, its fundamental mass, and its surface gravity match the Earth with a staggering, almost eerie precision. If you were to stand on its surface, your physical body would weigh exactly what it weighs right now. The gravitational pull on your bones would feel perfectly, undeniably familiar. But as we observe this world from the quiet isolation of high orbit, the visual reality of Trappist-1e shatters any illusion of a familiar home. There are no continents here. There are no jagged mountain ranges piercing the atmosphere. There are no sprawling deserts or shallow coastal shelves. The entire surface of the planet, every single square inch of the globe, is completely swallowed by a single monolithic global ocean. It is a true water world. Astronomers refer to a planet of this nature as a Hycean world, a massive, heavy terrestrial planet defined entirely by a deep, planetary-scale liquid ocean, suffocating beneath a thick, heavy, hydrogen-rich atmosphere. From the absolute vacuum of space, it appears as a perfect, flawless, mathematically smooth sphere of deep, heavy blue. There are no jagged brown landmasses to interrupt the curve of the horizon. There is absolutely no exposed silicate rock anywhere on the entire surface of the globe. There is only water wrapping around the entire circumference of the planet, swirling in massive, slow-moving, planetary-scale weather systems are incredibly thick bands of brilliant white clouds. These atmospheric formations are born from the relentless, unbroken evaporation of the global ocean beneath them. They drift with agonizing slowness across the deep blue canvas, completely unhindered by the friction of mountain ranges or the thermal interference of solid land, because the planet is tidally locked, forever presenting the exact same face to the sun. The atmosphere operates as a massive, continuous heat exchange engine. The clouds gather in highly organized, permanent equatorial bands, drawing the immense thermal energy from the dayside and carrying it outward in massive, slow-moving spirals toward the frozen, dark side of the globe. We descend into this global weather system. We drift downward, leaving the utter silence of space and passing into the upper layers of the thick, heavy atmosphere. The descent is slow and deeply insulated. As we pass through the miles-thick layers of dense atmospheric gas, the blinding, unfiltered light of the cosmos is slowly dialed back. The thick atmosphere acts as a massive planetary lens, scattering the shorter wavelengths of light and bathing the entire world below in a heavy, bruised, deeply comforting shade of dark crimson and indigo. We break through the lowest layer of the heavy cloud deck and look out across the surface of the world. The scale of the isolation here is absolute. It is a vast, endless, completely uninterrupted expanse of dark, heavy water. It stretches out in every conceivable direction, curving flawlessly over the horizon, meeting the heavy red sky in a perfect, unbroken line of planetary geometry. There is no land. There is no shore. There is absolutely nowhere to stand. If you were suspended above the surface of this alien ocean, you would be entirely alone. Thousands of miles of dark water in front of you. Thousands of miles of dark water behind you. The sheer, undeniable vastness of this aquatic desert is staggering, because there are no land masses to break the wind and no continental shelves to disrupt the deep subterranean currents. The fluid dynamics of this global ocean operate on a terrifying, magnificent scale. There are no crashing waves here. There is no white water. There are no violent, chaotic shorelines where the ocean meets the earth. There is only the swell, massive, silent mountains of dark water rolling endlessly across the surface of the globe. These deep ocean swells are hundreds of feet high and miles wide. They move with an incredibly slow, heavy, rhythmic momentum. Millions of tons of dark, cold liquid, rising and falling in perfect, eternal sequence. Because the star is an ultra-cool red dwarf, the water itself does not reflect a bright, tropical blue. Because it is absorbing the heavy infrared light, the ocean appears as a dark, profound, ink-like abyss. And resting above this rolling abyss, the celestial mechanics visible from the surface are breathtaking, hanging permanently in the heavy indigo sky, casting a long, dim, red reflection across the slow, rolling waves, is the star. But it is not alone, because the 7 planets of this system orbit in such staggering, dangerous proximity to one another. The neighboring worlds do not look like distant, twinkling stars. They appear as massive, highly detailed spheres, drifting slowly across the heavy, red sky. At this exact moment, the inner planet, Trappist-1d, is in transit. It looms impossibly huge in the heavens, appearing nearly twice the size of our own moon. You can clearly see the distinct geometric line of its own terminator zone, the stark division between its burning rock and its frozen ice, glowing faintly in the dark sky above the global ocean. The gravitational pull of these massive passing planets is immense. As they drift through the sky, Their massive gravity reaches down and physically pulls at the global ocean. It creates massive, complex tidal forces, drawing the heavy, dark water upward into slow, shifting bulges that travel across the globe in silent, mathematical harmony with the orbits above. To truly understand a global ocean of this magnitude, we must look beneath the rolling, dark swells. We must look at the brutal, unyielding laws of hydrostatic pressure. On Earth, the deepest, most terrifying trench in the Pacific Ocean reaches down a mere 7 miles into the crust. But on Trappist-1, astrophysicists hypothesize that the liquid water does not stop for hundreds of miles. It is a profoundly deep, bottomless abyss. If we were to, theoretically, descend beneath the surface, plunging down into the heavy, crushing dark of the alien ocean, the physics of the water would begin to fundamentally change. As you descend 10 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles down, the physical weight of the global ocean pressing down from above compounds exponentially. The pressure reaches millions of pounds per square inch, a crushing, absolute physical force that no biological organism or human engineering could ever survive. At these terrifying depths, the faint, dim red light of the star has been entirely absorbed. There is only absolute, eternal, pitch-black night. And long before the water ever touches the solid, silicate rock of the planet's core, the crushing pressure physically forces the liquid water to change its molecular state. It does not freeze from a drop in temperature. It is physically crushed into a solid state by the sheer, unyielding weight of its own gravity. It becomes an exotic, alien state of matter known as Ice 7, a massive, planetary mantle of high-pressure, hot ice, forged entirely by gravity, locking the deepest, darkest depths of the ocean in a permanent, rigid, heavy lattice of pressurized water. There is no sandy ocean floor. There are no volcanic trenches. There is only the silent, crushing, eternal dark, where the physics of water and stone become indistinguishable from one another. We return to the surface, breaking back through the heavy, dark blue swells and ascending into the thick, crimson atmosphere. It is a world of absolute, profound isolation. There is no land to conquer. There are no borders to defend. There is no history, no architecture, no passing of terrestrial time. There are no complex terrestrial anxieties here. There are no schedules, no deadlines, and no human demands. There is only the endless, heavy breathing of the water, the slow, hypnotic rise and fall of the dark swells, the eternal, dim, red light of the paralyzed sun, the silent, majestic transit of the massive planets in the sky. You simply exist, an invisible observer, watching the slow, unyielding machinery of fluid dynamics and gravity on a world where the ocean has no end. Let the sheer, bottomless scale of this water wash away the microscopic, irrelevant details of the waking world. Watch the massive, dark swells rise and fall in the heavy, red light. We leave the endless water to its eternal rhythm, drifting silently back up through the heavy cloud layer, rising past the slow-moving global winds, and returning to the freezing, weightless vacuum of the cosmos. We must push even further into the dark, moving away from the exact center of the habitable zone and pushing toward the colder, darker outer rim of the system, moving toward a world where the heat of the red dwarf begins to fundamentally fail, where the global ocean has been entirely conquered by the cold and locked in an unblinking, frozen stare. We leave the heavy, rolling swells of the global waterworld entirely behind us, ascending silently through the thick, hydrogen-rich atmosphere. We break the upper threshold of the cloud layer and return to the freezing, frictionless vacuum of the cosmic ocean. We are drifting further outward, pushing away from the exact, delicate center of the circumstellar habitable zone and moving steadily toward the cold, dark, unforgiving outer rim of the Trappist-1 system. The blistering, violent heat of the inner planets is now an unimaginable distance away. The intense ambient radiation of the ultra-cool red dwarf is visibly, physically weakening. The light we are traveling through is no longer a heavy, burning amber. It has degraded across the vast millions of miles of empty space, softening into a faint, ghostly, deep crimson glow. The mathematical balance of the system is tipping. We are approaching the fifth planet, Trappist-1F. In the complex, unyielding thermodynamic equation of this solar system, Trappist-1F sits on a razor's edge of celestial physics. It is a terrestrial world, roughly the same mass and density as our own Earth. And like the Waterworld before it, astrobiologists theorize that it too possesses a massive volume of liquid water. But as we observe this world from the quiet isolation of high orbit, the visual reality of Trappist-1 reveals a staggering, eerie transformation. Because it orbits further away from the star, the total volume of solar radiation it receives is drastically reduced. The thermal energy is simply not strong enough to sustain a global, liquid state across the entire surface. The cold has begun to conquer the water, but because the planet is tidally locked, permanently paralyzed by the immense gravity of the red dwarf, the freezing process does not occur evenly. It creates one of the most mesmerizing and unsettling geological formations in the known universe. Astronomers refer to a planet of this nature as an eyeball world, because the planet does not spin to distribute the faint heat. The night side of the globe, facing outward into the pitch-black void of deep space, has been entirely conquered by the cold. The temperature plunges hundreds of degrees below zero. Any water that exists on the dark hemisphere is violently frozen into a permanent, rigid lattice of solid ice. But the freezing mechanics do not stop at the terminator line, because the star's heat is so profoundly weak. The massive, miles-thick glaciers of the night side have slowly, relentlessly marched across the border of the twilight zone, advancing aggressively across the face of the day side. From orbit, the planet appears almost entirely encased in a blinding, flawless shell of thick, white glacial ice. There are no continents of rock. There are no sprawling forests or shallow seas. The vast majority of the globe is a highly reflective, frozen wasteland, reflecting the dim red light of the star back into the vacuum of space. This creates a terrifying, compounding physical phenomenon known as a runaway icehouse effect. The wider the planet becomes, the higher its albedo. It reflects more and more of the star's precious, limited heat away from the surface, causing the global temperature to drop even further, allowing the massive ice sheets to advance even deeper into the daylight. But the ice does not conquer the entire world. Right at the absolute center of the dayside, at the exact substellar point where the red dwarf is bolted permanently to the zenith of the sky, the thermal energy is just strong enough to hold the freezing dark at bay. The immense, focused heat of the unmoving sun burns a massive, perfectly circular hole straight through the global ice sheet. It creates a colossal, unfrozen ocean of liquid water, thousands of miles wide, staring directly, unblinking, at the face of the dying star, surrounded entirely by the blinding white ice. This massive, circular ocean appears deep, heavy, and incredibly dark blue. From the absolute silence of space, the planet literally resembles a colossal, frozen eyeball. The white ice acting as the sclera, the dark, perfectly round ocean acting as the iris and the pupil, staring eternally into the fire. We descend from orbit. We drift silently down through the thin, freezing atmosphere, moving toward the exact, jagged boundary where the global ice sheet meets the dark, unfrozen water. The descent is completely devoid of turbulence, because the vast majority of the planet is locked in a deep freeze. The atmosphere is incredibly thin, dry, and brutally cold. There are no massive, swirling hurricane systems here. There are no thick, heavy cloud bands sweeping across the equator. The sky is completely, perfectly clear. We break through the upper stratosphere and look out across the surface of the world. The scale of the frozen geometry here is absolute. We are suspended directly above the edge of the substellar ocean. Below us, the dark, heavy, liquid water laps gently against a massive, towering cliff of ancient, glowing white ice. This is not a gentle, sloping shoreline. The global ice sheet is thousands of feet thick. It abruptly, violently, ends in a sheer, vertical wall of jagged, frozen, fresh water, plunging straight down into the dark, bottomless depths of the ocean. If you were standing on the very edge of this massive ice cliff, the view would be utterly alien to the human mind. Looking forward, out across the vast, circular ocean, the water stretches endlessly toward the horizon. The sky above the water is a heavy, deep violet, dominated entirely by the massive, glowing red sphere of the sun, bolted permanently directly overhead. The heat radiating off the dark water creates a faint, shimmering haze in the freezing air. But if you were to turn around and look back across the global ice sheet, the reality of the planet shifts entirely. The blinding white, perfectly smooth glaciers stretch endlessly in the opposite direction, curving over the horizon toward the eternal night side. The sky above the ice rapidly darkens, shifting from deep violet to the absolute pitch-black void of deep space. Because the atmosphere is so thin and the air is so completely devoid of moisture. The stars of the Milky Way galaxy are brilliantly, perfectly visible in the middle of the day. Millions of sharp, unblinking points of ancient light hanging in the freezing black sky directly above the ice. The physical mechanics of this boundary are incredibly slow, yet entirely unstoppable. As the massive global ice sheet slowly, relentlessly pushes outward from the night side, driven by the unimaginable weight of its own gravity, it reaches the edge of the warm, substellar ocean. The extreme temperature differential causes the edge of the towering ice cliff to eventually fracture. Massive, monolithic blocks of solid ice, the size of entire terrestrial cities, crack and shear away from the global glacier. They fall in terrifying, extreme slow motion, plunging into the dark, heavy water of the central ocean. But because the atmosphere is so thin, and because the distances are so vast, this apocalyptic geological violence occurs in a state of profound, majestic quiet. There is only a deep, muffled, low-frequency groan echoing through the bedrock. The heavy, physical weight of millions of tons of ice collapsing into the dark water. These massive, city-sized icebergs do not float aimlessly. They are caught in the deep, slow-moving thermal currents of the ocean, drawn inexorably toward the exact center of the substellar point. As they drift slowly beneath the direct, unyielding heat of the red dwarf, they begin to melt. They dissolve entirely into the dark, heavy water, returning their liquid mass to the planetary system, before slowly evaporating into the thin atmosphere, drifting back to the frozen night side and falling as nitrogen snow to begin the cycle all over again. It is a flawless, eternal, mathematical machine, a world trapped in a perfect, unbreakable stalemate between the fire and the ice. To truly understand an eyeball world of this magnitude, we must look beneath the dark water. We must look at the brutal, unyielding physics of extreme cold and immense pressure. On Earth, ice floats. The solid state of water is less dense than its liquid state. But on Trappist-1, astrophysicists theorize that the massive, miles-thick glaciers on the night side exert such a crushing, absolute physical force that the ice at the very bottom of the global ocean is fundamentally altered. The hydrostatic pressure reaches millions of pounds per square inch, a crushing force that physically forces the water molecules to collapse into a denser, heavier crystalline structure. It becomes a layer of high-pressure ice, forged entirely by the weight of gravity. This means that beneath the dark, unfrozen pupil, the liquid ocean extends downward for hundreds of miles before eventually meeting a solid, permanent floor of exotic, pressurized ice. There is no silicate rock. There is no volcanic activity at the bottom of this sea. There is only the silent, crushing, eternal dark, where the heavy, freezing water is trapped between the towering ice walls above and the solid ice floor below. We return to the surface, breaking back through the still, dark water and ascending into the thin, freezing, violet atmosphere. It is a world of absolute, profound isolation, a landscape defined entirely by extreme thermodynamics and unyielding orbital mechanics. There is no complex biology here. There are no shifting continents. There is no passing of terrestrial time. There is only the endless, heavy stare of the dark water, looking out into the void. The slow, hypnotic lapping of the freezing waves against the towering white cliffs. The eternal, dim red light of the paralyzed sun. The silent, majestic transit of the massive planets in the starry sky. You simply exist, an invisible observer, watching the slow, unyielding machinery of ice and gravity on a world where the cold has nearly won. Let the sheer, highly insulated scale of this frozen world wash away the microscopic, irrelevant anxieties of your own life. Watch the massive, slow-moving shadows of the ice cliffs stretch across the dark water in the faint, distant red light. We leave the eyeball planet to its eternal, unblinking stare, drifting silently back up through the thin atmosphere, rising past the towering glaciers, and returning to the freezing, weightless vacuum of the cosmos. We must push even further into the dark, moving away from the habitable zone entirely, and pushing toward the absolute, desolate outer rim of the system, moving toward the final two worlds, where the heat of the red dwarf has entirely failed, where the global oceans are frozen solid all the way to their iron cores, and where the vacuum of space reigns supreme. We leave the towering ice cliffs and the dark, unblinking pupil of the eyeball planet entirely behind us, ascending silently through its thin, freezing atmosphere. We return to the total, frictionless vacuum of the cosmic ocean. We are drifting further outward, pushing away from the outer edge of the habitable zone, and crossing a final, absolute thermodynamic boundary in the architecture of this solar system. Astronomers refer to this invisible threshold as the frost line. It is the exact mathematical distance from a star where the ambient thermal energy drops so profoundly that volatile compounds like water, ammonia, and methane can no longer exist in a liquid or vapor state. Beyond this line, the intense, violent thermodynamics of the inner system completely collapse. The radiant heat of the ultra-cool red dwarf simply fails against the overwhelming cold of deep space. The light we are traveling through has degraded across tens of millions of miles of empty vacuum. It is no longer a heavy, burning amber. It has faded into a faint, ghostly, deep crimson glow. We are entering the deep freeze, the desolate, pitch-black outer rim of the system, drifting silently in this vast, eternal dark are the final two worlds, Trappist-1G and Trappist-1H. These are terrestrial planets, massive spheres of dense silicate rock and iron, but they have been fundamentally, irreversibly conquered by the cold. As we approach Trappist-1G, the visual reality of a world without heat becomes breathtakingly clear. Because it orbits so far from the star, the temperature on its surface plunges to nearly 400 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. At these extreme, crushing temperatures, the physical properties of matter begin to fundamentally change. Any atmosphere this planet might have once possessed billions of years ago has completely frozen and collapsed. The gases literally fell out of the sky, solidifying into a rigid, permanent layer of nitrogen and methane frost. From orbit, Trappist-1 appears as a dark, heavily cratered sphere of cracked, ancient white ice. There are no massive global oceans rolling beneath heavy clouds. There's no atmospheric wind to erode the sharp edges of the impact craters. The planet is completely, flawlessly exposed to the vacuum of space. It is a world of absolute, unyielding silence. We descend from high orbit. There is no atmospheric friction as we approach the surface. There is no turbulence. There is no sound of entry. There is only the slow, majestic geometry of the frozen terrain expanding beneath us. We drift downward and stop, suspended just a few feet above a massive, desolate plain of cracked nitrogen ice. If you were to stand on this frozen surface, the isolation would be absolute. Looking out across the alien landscape, the ground is a patchwork of deep, jagged fissures and towering ridges of solid, rock-hard ice. Because the temperature is so intensely cold, the ice here does not behave like the ice on Earth. It does not melt under pressure. It is as hard and as completely unforgiving as solid granite. And directly above this frozen wasteland is the sky. It is not blue. It is not the heavy violet of the Twilight Zone. It is the absolute, pitch-black void of deep space. Because there is no blanket of atmospheric gas to scatter the light, the sky is completely transparent. The entire, staggering majesty of the universe is perfectly visible in the middle of the day. Millions of sharp, unblinking points of ancient starlight, sweeping in a massive, glowing band of cosmic dust and distant nebulas directly overhead. The Milky Way galaxy, suspended in terrifying high definition and resting perfectly within that sea of distant stars. Incredibly small and incredibly dim is the sun. From this massive distance, the ultra-cool red dwarf no longer looks like a colossal, looming sphere of fire. It is shrunk down to a single, distinct, deep red point of light. It casts no warmth. It is nothing more than a faint, distant anchor of gravity, holding this frozen world from drifting away into the interstellar abyss. It is a landscape of profound, eternal stillness. But beneath this silent, dead exterior, the mathematical laws of the Trappist-1 system are still operating. Because these 7 planets are locked in a perfectly synchronized orbital resonance, their massive gravitational fields are constantly pulling and tugging at one another as they pass in the dark. This relentless gravitational manipulation creates a phenomenon known as tidal heating. Deep beneath the miles-thick crust of solid ice, the heavy silicate mantle and the iron core of Trappist-1 are continuously stretched and squeezed by the gravity of its neighboring worlds. This immense subterranean friction generates a faint, internal heat. It is not enough to melt the surface or warm the freezing vacuum of space, but it is enough to create localized pockets of pressurized liquid water and volatile gases deep within the crust. As the pressure in these subterranean pockets builds over thousands of years, the liquid seeks an escape through the deep, jagged fissures in the ice. We look out across the dark, frozen plain. In the distance, miles away across the jagged ice, a brilliant, slow-motion display of planetary physics begins. It is a cryo-volcano, an ice volcano, because there is zero atmospheric pressure on the surface of this world. The eruption does not look like a volcano on Earth. Deep beneath the surface, the pressure finally shatters the bedrock. A massive fissure tears open, and millions of gallons of pressurized liquid water and ammonia are violently forced upward through the miles of solid ice. As soon as the liquid breaches the surface and touches the absolute zero of the cosmic vacuum, the thermodynamics of the event become mind-bending. Because there is zero atmospheric pressure, the boiling point of water drops instantly to absolute zero. The moment the liquid touches the vacuum, it violently boils, vaporizing into a massive, expanding cloud of gas. But simultaneously, because the ambient temperature of space is hundreds of degrees below zero, that expanding gas is instantly, violently, flash frozen. The water molecules crystallize in a fraction of a second, expanding outward in a massive, perfectly symmetrical umbrella of glowing white diamond dust. Because there is no air resistance to slow it down, and because the gravity of this planet is incredibly weak, the plume of frozen ice crystals shoots dozens of miles up into the pitch-black sky. It is an awe-inspiring, terrifyingly beautiful cosmic fountain. Millions of tons of microscopic ice crystals drifting in extreme, majestic, slow motion against the backdrop of the Milky Way galaxy. As the crystals reach the absolute peak of their trajectory, they catch the faint, ghostly red light of the distant sun. They shimmer and glow in the dark, before slowly, silently, drifting back down to the surface like a gentle, heavy snow. There is absolutely no sound. The ripping of the miles-thick ice crust, the explosive release of millions of tons of pressure, the massive, violent eruption of a planetary core, happening in total, unyielding silence. We observe the slow motion falling of the red-lit snow for just a moment longer. We leave the cryovolcano to its silent, eternal eruption, drifting back up from the cracked, granite-like ice, rising out of the weak gravitational pull of the planet, and returning to the empty void. We push toward the absolute edge, moving outward to the seventh and final world of the system, Trappist-1H. It is the smallest and the most distant planet in the orbital chain, sitting at the very boundary of the star's gravitational reach. Trappist-1H is the lonely sentinel of the Outer Rim. The orbital mechanics here are vastly different from the scorching, high-velocity inner worlds. Because it is so far away, the planet moves with a slow, heavy, majestic momentum through the dark. It takes nearly 19 Earth days to complete a single orbit around the dim, red star. From this absolute vantage point, hovering in the freezing vacuum near the seventh planet, the entire solar system is laid out before us. We can look back toward the center. We can see the faint, deep red glow of the ultra-cool dwarf star. We can see the microscopic, dark silhouettes of the 6 inner planets drifting slowly in their perfect mathematical sequence. The burning rock, the permanent twilight, the endless global oceans, and the blinding white ice, all of it operating flawlessly, silently, in the dark. This system has been spinning in this exact, perfect mechanical rhythm for billions of years. It will continue to spin for trillions of years more, long after the Earth is gone, long after the history of our own world has faded into the cosmic background radiation. These 7 silent planets will still be orbiting their warm red star. The scale of this reality is so massive, so completely independent of human existence, that it demands a profound, absolute surrender. There is nothing required of you here. There are no terrestrial problems that can survive the freezing, massive distance of this void. You are entirely insulated by the unyielding laws of physics. Let the heavy, silent machinery of the planets pull you down into the dark. Watch the faint red light reflect off the ancient, frozen surface of the final world. We have reached the edge of the system. The cataloging is complete. The thermodynamics have been measured. The distances have been crossed. It is time to pull back and let the vast, quiet ocean of the cosmos simply close over us. We leave the frozen, cracked nitrogen plains of the outermost planet entirely behind us. Drifting silently away from the edge of Trappist-1, we break the final gravitational tether of the solar system. We are moving backward, pulling away into the absolute, frictionless vacuum of the interstellar medium. As we drift further into the dark, the visual reality of the planetary system begins to fundamentally change. The massive, staggering scale we just witnessed is slowly, ruthlessly compressed by the unyielding physics of distance. The 7 terrestrial worlds, the scorching magma oceans, the permanent howling twilight, the bottomless global Waterworld, and the towering miles-thick glaciers all begin to shrink. They blur together, losing their distinct, violent geology. The planetary orbits become nothing more than microscopic, invisible rings in the dark. The ultra-cool red dwarf, the massive burning nuclear engine that held these 7 worlds in its unyielding grip for billions of years, slowly fades. Its deep, heavy amber light weakens, degrading across millions of miles of empty space until it is nothing more than a single, faint, deep crimson pinprick in the infinite black. And then, as we continue to drift backward, it vanishes entirely, swallowed completely by the vast, quiet ocean of the cosmos. The Trappist-1 system is gone. We are now suspended in the true, profound emptiness of deep space. This is the space between the stars. It is an environment so completely devoid of matter, so intensely, perfectly empty, that human mathematics struggle to define it. If you were to take a cubic meter of the air you breathe on Earth It contains roughly 10 million, billion molecules of gas. But out here, in the freezing, silent void of the interstellar medium, a cubic meter of space contains perhaps a single, lonely atom of hydrogen. It is a flawless, absolute vacuum. The temperature here is roughly 2.7 degrees above absolute zero. It is the ambient, lingering chill of the cosmic microwave background, the ancient, fading echo of the birth of the universe itself. It is a cold so profound, so absolute, that it physically stops the movement of atoms. In this perfect, freezing quiet, we can look out at the true, staggering architecture of our galactic neighborhood, surrounding us in every conceivable direction, forming a massive, glowing, three-dimensional tapestry of ancient light, is the Milky Way galaxy. To understand the scale of the structure we are floating within, we must entirely discard the human concept of distance. The Milky Way is a barred spiral galaxy, a colossal, slowly rotating disk of cosmic dust, dark matter, and burning plasma. From one edge of the galactic disk to the other, it measures roughly 100,000 light years across. If you were to travel at the absolute, unbreakable speed limit of the universe, 186,000 miles every single second, it would still take you 100 millennia just to cross it. And suspended within this massive spiraling disk are the stars, not millions, not billions. Astrophysicists estimate that the Milky Way contains between 100 billion and 400 billion individual stars. 400 billion massive, roaring nuclear furnaces. Some are colossal, blinding blue hypergiants, living fast, violent lives before detonating in massive supernovae that outshine entire galaxies. Some are yellow dwarfs, like our own sun, quietly nurturing terrestrial planets in their warm, insulated, habitable zones. But the vast, overwhelming majority of them, nearly 75% of the entire galactic population, are ultra-cool red dwarfs, trillions upon trillions of ancient, slow-burning embers. Exactly like Trappist-1, they are scattered across the spiral arms of the galaxy like glowing red sand, burning silently, efficiently, hoarding their hydrogen fuel for the deep, dark future of the cosmos. And at the exact, absolute center of this colossal, rotating structure, 26,000 light years away from where we are currently suspended, is the galactic core, a region of space so densely packed with ancient, massive stars that the night sky would be blindingly bright. And hiding in the exact center of that brilliant light is a supermassive black hole known as Sagittarius A star, an object possessing the physical mass of 4 million suns, crushed entirely into a single, infinitely dense point of singularity. Its gravitational pull is so immense, so absolutely terrifying, that it anchors the entire galaxy. Every single star, every nebula, every frozen comet and rocky planet is caught in its heavy, slow-moving, unyielding gravitational waltz. Our own solar system, the Earth, the Sun, the Moon, is currently orbiting that central black hole at a staggering velocity of 515,000 miles per hour. We are moving through the cosmic ocean at a blinding speed. Yet, because the galaxy is so utterly, incomprehensibly massive, it takes our solar system 230 million years to complete a single orbit. The last time our planet was in this exact position in the Milky Way galaxy, the first dinosaurs were just beginning to walk across the supercontinent of Pangaea. The physical reality of this deep time, of these massive, tectonic, cosmic epochs, completely neutralizes the anxieties of human existence. The universe is not rushing. It is not operating on a schedule. It is entirely indifferent to the microscopic deadlines of biological life. It simply operates, a flawless, majestic, eternal machine. But even this galaxy, with its hundreds of billions of stars, is nothing more than a single grain of sand on an infinite cosmic beach beyond the Milky Way. Stretching out into the dark for tens of billions of light years is the observable universe. It contains an estimated 2 trillion entire galaxies, 2 trillion massive, spiraling islands of light, separated by voids of empty space so vast that light itself takes billions of years to cross them. And because of the mysterious absolute physics of dark energy, the space between these galaxies is physically expanding. The universe is stretching apart in all directions, moving faster and faster, pushing the distant galaxies away from us at terrifying speeds. In the incredibly deep, distant future of the cosmos, billions of years from now, the expansion of the universe will become so severe that the light from other galaxies will simply no longer be able to reach us. The night sky will slowly, relentlessly go dark. The cosmic epoch we are currently living in, the stelliferous era, the era of starlight and bright, violent galaxies, will eventually come to an end. The massive blue stars will detonate and die. The yellow suns will expand into red giants, shed their outer layers, and collapse into dead, glowing light dwarfs. The universe will grow quiet. It will enter the Degenerate era, an unimaginably vast, dark epoch where the only objects left in the pitch-black void will be the ultra-cool red dwarfs. Trillions of years from now, when the rest of the universe has faded into the absolute cold of the dark, systems like Trappist-1 will still be glowing. They will be the final, silent sanctuaries of warmth in a dying cosmos. They will continue to cast their faint, heavy, deep crimson light onto their frozen, rocky worlds, keeping their silent, unblinking watch over the eternal night, until finally, trillions upon trillions of years in the future, even they will exhaust their fuel. Their fires will slowly dim. The deep red light will fade to black, and the universe will finally, completely go to sleep. A profound, absolute, and eternal rest. The scale of this cosmic timeline is the ultimate sanctuary. It proves, with absolute, unyielding mathematical certainty, that the problems of the waking world are completely, entirely insignificant. Your anxieties, your stress, your exhaustion are microscopic, fleeting shadows in the face of the eternal, quiet mechanics of the void. You are entirely relieved of your burdens. The physics of the universe do not require your attention. The orbital mechanics do not need your help to spin. The stars do not need your permission to burn. You are simply allowed to exist, to float perfectly, weightlessly, in the heavily insulated safety of the dark. Allow the physical, overwhelming gravity of the cosmos to translate into the gravity of your own room. Feel the heavy, undeniable pull of the bed beneath you. The muscles in your back and shoulders are perfectly aligned with the massive, slow-moving rotation of the earth. The tension in your jaw has completely dissolved into the cold, quiet vacuum of space. Your breathing has matched the slow, eternal, rhythmic pulsing of the distant red stars. You are perfectly safe. You are entirely insulated from the extreme thermodynamics of the waking world. The cataloging of the 7 worlds is complete. The vast distances have been crossed. The heavy, iron blast shutters of your own mind have been pulled securely closed. If you are still awake, resting quietly in the heavily insulated safety of your own room, while the earth turns slowly through the dark ocean of space outside your window, please leave your location and local time in the comments below. It is our silent, global ledger, a quiet, terrestrial record of everyone who has sought shelter in the ancient, massive architecture of the cosmos tonight. The orbits are locked. The void is peaceful. Until our next journey, sleep well.